For centuries, the history of India has been defined by a colossal empire, the Mughals. Their legacy is etched into the very soil of the subcontinent, from the textbooks we study to the monuments we revere. We are taught tales of great emperors, Babur, Humayun, Akbar, and Shah Jahan. But what if the history we learned, the names we accepted, were not just incomplete, but fundamentally incorrect? This is a story of historical revision, where the founder of this supposed dynasty, the man known as Mughal Emperor Babur, despised the very title attached to his name. It reveals a truth far more complex than the sanitized narrative, a history laced with profound irony, political maneuvering, and calculated destruction. The man who conquered India was not a Mughal emperor at all. He was a Timurid-Gurkhaniya. He was a poet prince who was also a zealous crusader for Darul Islam. The empire he established was not the product of benevolent unification, but of raw, violent ambition. The school history we were taught was entirely incorrect, perhaps even deliberately misleading. This is the true hidden history of the early imperial age, unlocked by turning back to the primary sources themselves. To understand the man we call Babur, we must first discard the label Mughal. The term itself represents a fundamental flaw in European historical understanding. Babur was descended from two formidable lineages. On his father's side, he traced his ancestry to Timur, and on his mother's side to Genghis Khan. Yet Babur himself identified as a Timurid. In fact, when reading the Baburnama, one finds over 100 instances where Babur uses derogatory terms for the Mughals, Mongols, asserting that they bring restlessness and cannot be trusted. The distinction between these two branches was crucial. The Mongols, under Genghis Khan, followed a secular code and allowed all religions to be practiced. However, Genghis Khan was a secular killer. He killed any enemy regardless of religion, which resulted in Muslims being the biggest victims of Mongol massacres. Timur, in contrast, was highly Persianized. He was deeply influenced by Persian culture, which is why the court language of Babur and his successors was Persian, not Mongolian. Timur detested being called a Mongol. To solve the problem of his contradictory aspirations to be both a caliph and ruler of the Mongol dynasty, Timur married into the house of Genghis Khan. He took the title Gurkhaniya, meaning son-in-law. Thus, the empire he founded, and the empire Babur subsequently established in India, was the Timurid-Gurkhaniya Empire. So why did history mistake him for a Mughal? The expert suggests two reasons. First, connecting the rulers to Timur would highlight his religious angle of jihad and his notorious massacre in Delhi, where the city was tormented by the stench of the dead for weeks. Second, Europeans focused on race, as evidenced by theories like the Aryan invasion theory, focused on Babur's common ancestor, the Mongol, rather than his preferred culture, Timurid, Persianized. Babur's early life was marked by instability. Having lost his father at age 11, he was forced into a constant struggle to establish and secure his territory against family conspiracies and constant threats from enemies like Shaybani Khan, a dynamic likened to a Tom and Jerry story. This relentless cycle of losing and gaining land earned him the title of the chessboard king. By the time he came to Kabul in 1504, the place where his career saw its biggest transformation, he had become a highly seasoned conqueror. His driving ambition was not just survival, but the fulfillment of Timur's unfinished dream. Timur had only raided India, but Babur intended to establish a permanent empire. After 5 failed attempts, often thwarted by geographical challenges, freezing conditions, and lack of supplies, forcing his men to eat their horses, Babur finally crossed the Indus in 1526. In the Battle of Panipat, Babur faced the complacent ruler, Ibrahim Lodi. Babur's victory was cemented by superior technology. He brought Turkish methods of warfare and artillery, led by his companion Ali Kuli. This use of cannons and gunpowder techniques was the deciding factor in major battles like Panipat, Kanwa, and Chanderi. Babur's intent was clear. He wished to establish Darul Islam in India. He was unequivocally cruel and anti-Hindu, celebrating the smashing of idols and declaring his intent to establish the new realm. He also attempted the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas, a job later completed by the Taliban. Yet, one enduring controversy must be corrected: the destruction of the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya. Primary sources, including the Baburnama, offer no mention of Babur destroying a temple in Ayodhya. Inscriptions presented in court regarding the mosque showed egregious inconsistencies, listing 2 different dates, 1523 and 1528, and even mentioned Aurangzeb's lineage. Furthermore, contemporary texts, like those by Akbar's court historian Abul Fazl, mentioned Ram Navami being celebrated at the site. The traveler accounts confirm that Aurangzeb was responsible for the destruction, a fact corroborated by local memory in the 1760s. Adding to the historical irony, Babur's personal life suggests a deep paradox. It is established that Babur was gay, a fact he mentions openly in the Baburnama. He writes of his reluctance to go to his wife Aisha and his deep infatuation with a boy named Babri. The expert notes the sheer irony that the existing mosque was named Babri, based on a primary source term used to describe a person who was gay. Babur eventually submitted to pressure from his powerful mother and grandmother, the true kingmakers of the Timurid dynasty, to pursue dynastic duties. Cultural or political consequences. Despite ruling from India, Babur and his successors, even as late as Aurangzeb, never considered Hindustan their homeland. Their persistent goal was to return to their true home, Samarkand. The economic and political consequences of this dynasty were severe. Modern historical analysis, even by historians often seen as pro-Mughal, shows that the Mughal taxation policy was highly regressive. Mughal rulers demanded high taxes, sometimes up to 53% in regions like Malwa, making their policies more oppressive than those of the British. This economic exploitation is confirmed by macroeconomic data. From 1500 to 1820, India's GDP per capita growth was negative, while the overall GDP share of the world remained high, indicating vast wealth within the empire. The negative per capita growth demonstrated that the common people were becoming poorer. The money accumulated in the Sultanate's coffers, marking the empire as inherently regressive. Perhaps the most tragic example of this imperial cruelty is the Taj Mahal. While often romanticized as a monument of love built by Shah Jahan for Mumtaz, the expert describes it as a symbol of genocide. The structure was commissioned for 4.18 crore silver coins. This construction coincided with a severe, man-made famine in Deccan, Malwa, and Surat. To punish his enemies, Shah Jahan instructed his army to destroy crops, burn fields, and let horses trample the soil, making it barren. The resulting famine caused the death of an estimated 7.4 million people, nearly double the number who died in the Bengal famine under Winston Churchill. Eyewitness accounts from the period, including those of Shah Jahan's own court historian Lahori, describe the utter barbarity, with people driven to cannibalism. The fact that the Taj Mahal was commissioned during the very famine created by the emperor highlights the sheer disparity and disregard for human life. These historical misrepresentations continue to fuel confusion in the modern world. Consider the surprising position of India's first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru wrote in his book that Babur was the most civilized and cultural person one would ever meet. The expert views this radical praise as a profound lack of knowledge, failing to account for Babur's violent zealotry and his attempts to destroy Buddhist sites. A distinct modern cultural paradox exists concerning the common use of the surname Khan among Indian Muslims. Khan is a Central Asian term for the chief of a tribe, a title used by the Mongol leaders. Since the Mongols, Khans were historically the biggest persecutors and slaughterers of Muslims, the use of Khan as a surname today is seen as deeply ironic and paradoxical. The most disturbing modern consequence, however, may lie in the global ramifications of similar historical alliances. The expert contends that the roots of modern terrorism, groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, can be traced back to the unholy alliance between Hitler and Islamist Arabs during World War II. Hitler was viewed by many Arabs as a second prophet, and even the 12th Imam, with slogans appearing on Arabian streets proclaiming, "In the heaven we have Allah, on the earth we have Hitler." This collaboration was driven by a single, terrifying common enemy, the Jews. The expert argues that the Free Palestine movement today is functionally equivalent to the Nazi movement, supported by the discovery of Nazi symbols in Hamas hideouts. This historical link suggests that what some view as liberation is, in origin and intent, a continuation of Nazi ideology.
The history of the Mughal Empire is not a simple narrative of conquerors settling a land. It is a story of ambition, driven by the ghosts of Central Asian ancestors, carried out by a dynasty that prioritized religious and political expansion over the welfare of its subjects. From the gay poet Prince Babur to the genocidal builder Shah Jahan, the facts revealed by primary sources force us to abandon the romanticized view of imperial history. The term Mughal Emperor itself is a persistent historical error, a misinterpretation of race over culture propagated centuries ago. True historical understanding demands that we discard translations influenced by political motives and return to the original texts. As new materials and honest academic work emerge, there is hope that the academic narrative can be corrected. We must stop blindly following established texts and seek the true, complex, and often uncomfortable history that resides in the archives. Unpacking this history is like looking at a famous painting through a newly cleaned lens. The beauty remains, but the darker, hidden intentions beneath the surface are finally brought into sharp, undeniable focus.